If you're listening to this at night, when the world is quiet, and your thoughts are louder than usual, then maybe this story is meant for you. I've carried this inside me for years, not because I was afraid to speak, but because I didn't know how to explain a pain that slowly becomes part of you. Tonight, I'm not here to blame anyone. I'm not here to prove that I was right. I'm just here to tell the truth, my truth. And maybe, somewhere in this story, you'll hear a piece of yourself. If you're listening to this at night, when the world is quiet, and your thoughts are louder than usual, then maybe this story is meant for you. I've carried this inside me for years, not because I was afraid to speak, but because I didn't know how to explain a pain that slowly becomes part of you. Tonight, I'm not here to blame anyone. I'm not here to prove that I was right. I'm just here to tell the truth, my truth, and maybe, somewhere in this story, you'll hear a piece of yourself. I've always been the kind of woman who feels deeply but speaks softly. I notice things others missed, the shift in tone, the pause before a sentence, the silence that means more than words. From the outside, my life looked calm, stable, normal, but inside, I was constantly adjusting myself to fit into spaces that were slowly shrinking. I learned early on that being easy to love often means being easy to overlook. So I became patient, understanding, flexible, not because I was weak, but because I believed love was supposed to feel like sacrifice. When he came into my life, he didn't arrive with grand gestures. He arrived quietly. He listened. He noticed. He made me feel like my presence mattered. For the first time in a long time, I felt chosen. I didn't fall in love quickly. I fell slowly, carefully, honestly. I trusted him with the parts of me that rarely see daylight. My fears, my past, my soft spots. And when I loved with loyalty. I didn't play games. I didn't test him. I didn't keep my heart halfway out the door. I believed that if you give someone your best, they'll protect it. I was wrong. The change didn't happen overnight. It never does. It started with small things. He stopped asking how my day was, stopped noticing when I was quiet. Conversations became shorter. Eye contact disappeared. Presence turned into habit. I told myself I was imagining it. I always did, because admitting the truth meant facing a fear I wasn't ready for. So I stayed silent. I stayed understanding. I told myself, he's tired, he's stressed. This phase will pass. But phases pass. Patterns don't. There's a strange loneliness that comes from being with someone who no longer sees you. I was there for everything. Emotionally, mentally, physically, but somehow I became background noise. My kindness became expected. My patience became invisible. And the more I gave, the less he noticed. That's the part no one warns you about. When you love quietly, people forget how loud your absence could be. We started living side by side, not together. I could feel him drifting, even when he was sitting right next to me. I wanted to ask, are you still here with me? But instead, I asked nothing, because I was afraid of the answer. So I chose silence over truth. And in that silence, distance grew comfortable for him. What I didn't realize at the time was that my silence was teaching him something. It was teaching him that I would always stay. That no matter how distant he became, no matter how careless he grew, I would adjust. And once someone believes you'll never leave, they stop choosing you. At night, when everything was quiet, my thoughts would finally speak. I'd lie awake asking myself, when did I start feeling alone in a relationship? But even then, I didn't blame him. I blamed myself. I told myself I needed to try harder, be softer, be easier. I didn't realize I was disappearing. I didn't know then, that someone else had entered the picture. Not officially, not openly, but emotionally. And emotional absence always arrives before physical departure. The night I finally understood what was happening, everything inside me went quiet. Not broken, not angry, just clear, and that clarity would change everything. I remembered the first time I felt it. Not fully, not consciously, but like a shadow brushing the edges of my mind. He smiled at me, but it wasn't the smile I used to know. It was polite, almost rehearsed. I could see it in his eyes. The warmth I loved was still there, faint, but distant, like a lighthouse behind a thick fog. I told myself, I'm imagining things. I always told myself that. But there's a subtle truth in imagination when your heart senses something others can't see. And that night, I realized that being unnoticed isn't always about anger or neglect. Sometimes it's about the quiet entrance of someone else. I didn't see it at first. The way his phone would buzz and he'd hide it casually. The way his attention would flicker, sometimes absent, sometimes overly animated. But never for me. There's a slow, creeping knowledge in betrayal. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It whispers. It lingers. It makes your chest tighten in places you didn't know existed. I started noticing the small things. A laugh shared when I wasn't around. A casual text that lingered too long on his screen before disappearing. And the way he'd look at me, trying to convince me, and maybe himself, that nothing had changed. I didn't want to believe it, not because I didn't see it, but because believing it meant letting go of the illusion of us. We kept living in the same apartment, same routines, same dinners, same quiet nights where I pretend everything was fine. I mastered the art of normalcy. I smiled at him. I laughed when he made jokes. I even held his hand when he reached for mine. But inside, I was quietly unraveling. There's a particular kind of pain that comes from loving someone who is already half elsewhere. It's like being underwater, feeling the world above you clearly, but knowing you can't reach it. And yet, I didn't confront him. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply watched. Because sometimes the storm teaches more than words ever could. It was a night like this one. Dim light, soft music, and the kind of quiet that makes your thoughts feel loud. He laughed at a message on his phone. I saw it reflected in the corner of my eye. The way he looked, the way he smiled at her words, the way his thumb lingered over the screen before putting it away. I felt a hollow in my chest. Not rage, not despair, just a quiet, absolute understanding. I realized I had been replaced, emotionally first, physically maybe later. And that realization, though painful, didn't make me scream. It made me breathe, because in that moment, clarity arrived. There's a difference between being cheated on and being replaced emotionally. Cheating is loud, explosive. Emotional replacement is quiet. It's subtle. It's the invisible theft of connection, attention, and loyalty. I had given him my heart entirely. My fears, my past, my softest, most fragile parts, all shared with him. And someone else had quietly taken what I once thought was uncheckable. I questioned myself. Was I too much? Too quiet? Too patient? But no, I knew the truth. I had loved honestly, openly, with everything I had. And love alone isn't enough to make someone choose you. I could have stayed. I could have continued giving quietly, hoping he'd come back. But that's not how love works. Not for the heart that's fully aware. I made a choice. A quiet, powerful choice that night. I would no longer exist solely in someone else's shadow. I started small, noticing myself again, speaking for myself, taking time for things that made me happy. It felt strange at first, like stepping into sunlight after years in shade. But it was necessary. because the person I needed most to protect was me. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It's not dramatic or poetic at first. It's the small acts. I began to remember laughter I had forgotten. Simple joy in books, in walks, in the quiet of night. I stopped measuring myself against his absence. I started measuring myself against my own heart. And slowly, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to believe in a long time. I could survive this. I could feel whole again, even stronger than before. It wasn't long before he noticed the change. The way I carried myself, the quiet confidence that replaced my former shadow of patience. He came to me, not with excuses, but with a subtle plea. Not for forgiveness, but for attention. I saw clearly then that the power in relationships isn't in how much you give, but in how much you respect yourself. And I understood. I had nothing to prove, no one to convince. That night, I realized something deeper. Love isn't about who stays with you in the easy moments. It's about who chooses you even when no one is watching. And the truth is, some people will never choose you, but that's okay, because there is a life waiting for you, beyond the shadow of their indifference. At night, I sit by the window, listening to the quiet hum of the city, feeling the soft wind on my skin. I reflect on the journey, the pain, the betrayal, the freedom, and I realize I am still whole. I am still capable of love. And I am still worthy of being chosen, not by him, not by anyone, but by myself first. Because love that begins with self-respect is the kind that lasts forever. So if you're listening to this tonight, if your heart feels heavy, if you've loved someone who didn't choose you, know this: your silence doesn't diminish your worth. Your patience isn't weakness. Your love isn't a debt to be repaid. And sometimes, the hardest goodbye is the one that frees you to truly live. Because in the end, choosing yourself is the bravest love of all. Emotional absence is more painful than physical distance. Self-respect is the foundation of true love. Healing is quiet, personal, and transformative. Choosing yourself is never selfish, it's survival, strength, and love combined. If you're listening to this tonight, when the world is quiet, and your thoughts feel louder than usual, then I want you to hear this, not as a lecture, not as advice from someone else's life, but as a quiet truth I learned the hardest way. Love, the kind that changes you, doesn't always come back the way you gave it. It's easy to say we love someone completely, to dedicate our hearts, our time, our energy. And yet, sometimes, the other person is not capable of meeting us there. I spent years believing that if I loved enough, if I was patient enough, if I sacrificed enough, then love would always be returned. And for a long time, I convinced myself it was true. I silenced my doubts. I adjusted my words, my moods, my life, so that someone else could feel comfortable. I thought that being soft, being understanding, being endlessly accommodating was the highest form of love. But what I didn't know, what I didn't realize until much later, is that love isn't about giving yourself completely to someone who doesn't see you. Love isn't about bending and shrinking to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold your heart. True love begins with yourself. It begins with noticing the quiet spaces in your life, where you've been invisible, where your voice has been waiting to be heard, and finally giving it permission to speak. When someone leaves physically or emotionally, it's not always a punishment. It's not always a reflection of your worth. It's sometimes a gentle, painful nudge from the universe, telling you that the life you've been living was never truly yours to begin with. I learned this the hard way. One loved fully, I gave fully, and still I was replaced. And yet, that absence became my greatest teacher. In the quiet nights, when the apartment is still, You start noticing yourself sunlight in your favorite corner, the smell of coffee, the sound of your own laughter, the weight of your thoughts undiluted by anyone else. Healing doesn't arrive with drama. It comes quietly, in little steps, until one day you realize you're no longer the person who bent, waited, or vanished in someone else's shadow. Freedom is quiet too. It whispers that you are whole, that your worth isn't tied to anyone's recognition, and that your love, patience, and kindness were never wasted. They were lessons teaching you to love yourself fiercely. Being left behind doesn't make you weak. Being replaced doesn't mean you failed. It's a chance to rediscover yourself, set boundaries, honor your needs, and step fully into your power. Choosing yourself is brave. It sustains you when no one else is around. It lets you sleep knowing you didn't compromise your soul. And only when you are whole can you love freely, without fear or dependence. I learned to laugh again, walk alone without loneliness, speak for myself, and honor my heart. Emotional absence doesn't reflect your worth, it reflects their limits. So tonight, remember this. You are enough. You have always been enough. The one who cannot see your worth does not define it. Choose yourself. Protect your peace. Love yourself as fiercely as you ever loved someone else. Because in the end, choosing yourself is not the end of love, it's the beginning of everything. If this story spoke to you, or gave you even a little comfort tonight, I'd be so grateful for your support. Don't forget to subscribe to Storycell Haven, so we can share more stories like this together. Thank you for listening, and good night.